Hello and welcome to the next episode of the podcast, a cannabis show for budding enthusiasts. This episode was brought to you by 420 Australia, The Billy Shop, Organic Gardening Solutions, and all things Pbud. On this episode, we're joined by the man Pbud to talk all things Chemdog. So get comfy and enjoy. Alrighty, so a big welcome and thank you for Pbud for coming on the show today.
Yeah, hello.
And for anyone who hasn't seen the earlier episodes, Pbud and Joe Brand were the two guys who sold the weed to Mass G at the Grateful Dead show, which then went on to give birth to the Chemdog strains. But with all that being said, my first question is, how did you meet Joe Brand?
I met Joe B. at Western State College in Gunnison, Colorado in 1987. I had applied to a few schools out in Colorado. It's the only one I got into, a.k.a. Wasted State. My parents were real proud. But it was a great school. I had a really fun time there. And I met him in the cafeteria. I was just going to get something to eat. I didn't really know anyone there. And I saw him sitting at a table with a couple other of his friends that he came out from New Jersey with, and they had tie-dye T-shirts on, Grateful Dead T-shirts, so it kind of drew me over there, and just went over there and just started talking to him, and we've been friends ever since.
And so was it Joe who got you into the Grateful Dead, or were you already into it before that?
I was already into it. He was already into it. We'd both gotten into it in high school. I probably got into it my freshman year in high school. My brother was a big Deadhead, and I grew up in Connecticut, so there were a lot of shows right around us within 2-3 hours, many places they used to play, so I got to see many shows in high school, so I was a pretty big Deadhead by the time I got out to Western State.
Okay, awesome. And so before we get to that infamous show, what type of weed were you guys smoking growing up?
In Connecticut, I lived about an hour outside New York City, so we got a lot of strains from other countries like Vietnam and Afghan bud, and a lot of real Thai stick. Just a lot of different flavors that I was smoking in high school. When we got out to Western State, the infamous Pbud, we started smoking that, which is outdoor strain in Colorado. Big, huge, forearm sized colas, or you get like a pound just full of little popcorn buds that were just lime green and piney tasting, and just really beautiful looking pod.
Awesome. And so was this something that was around when you had access to the dog bud, or was it before or after that?
It was before the dog bud and during, but I moved there in 87, and I think the Pbud was around since at least the early 80s, I would think. My friend Rob would know a lot more about that than me. But it was definitely before the dog bud. Yeah.
Okay. So, just kind of segueing into the dog bud, what was that like for you guys? Because you guys, I think if what I read was correct, was that you had access to that for a while before, that fateful encounter at Deercreek.
We actually not, if it was so long ago, so I've talked to Joe and other people and got the real, just a pound and a half came into Crested Butte the summer of 91, and Joe Brand bought it. I think he bought a pound of it or all of it. Guy approached him, and because he knew Joe and would, had money and could get rid of it, and he was kind of the Pbud man too. So Joe bought it. He bought it all, and I think, and and we're going on tour, and I'm not sure, in like a couple weeks or something. So it was kind of perfect, and we kind of took it all on Dead Tour, which kind of pissed off a lot of people in town because they couldn't get it. But it was just absolutely amazing. We had never seen anything, smelled anything like it before. We were smoking a lot of Pbud. We were smoking some indoor hash plant, which is called the Puck, Skelly hash plant. A Puck, which is a pretty famous one here in Colorado. I can tell you the story on that one too. But we were smoking that, M39, Big Bud, Skunk Number 1, some good indoor strains, but we had never seen anything like this or smelled anything like this before. It was called, when Joe got it, it was called Dog Bud, because after you smoke it, it made you roll over like a dog. That's what the meaning of the Dog Bud that I remember. It was. So we smelled it. We started calling it Chem weed because of just the odor off it. It smelled chemical, fuel, just insane terpenes, as they say today. It was just amazing, the smell of it. And so we started calling it Chem weed, which kind of just as a joke. So we kind of changed the name to Chem weed, and then brought it, not sure exactly how much we brought on tour, but probably close to a pound on Dead Tour.
And so these are kind of the days leading up to that show, am I correct?
Yep, that was summer of '91, so I'm not sure where the tour started, but that happened at, I think there were 2 shows in Deercreek. That happened at one of those shows in Deercreek. I think we were just smoking it ourselves for the first shows, and then we had split it up into eighths and just decided to bust it out at Deercreek, and it was amazing because it was summertime too. So, like I said before, it's pretty dry weed in the summer on Dead Tour. So there were a lot of lucky people in that parking lot that day. and one really lucky one.
yeah. And so when Mass G came up to you guys, was it just any old moment for you, or did you have some inkling, like Skunk VA mentions when he was first approached with the guy who would give him the Chemdog, like he knew that it was, as the guy walked towards him, he knew it was an important contact. Did you feel the same way about Mass G, or it was just kind of an everyday thing?
It was just kind of it was more friendly because it was so long ago, but we just started selling it at Joe's car, at Joe's Subaru. I remember, a green Subaru, and we started just said Kind Bud, and one guy came up and he was just like, holy shit, look at this stuff. And he ran off and brought up 2 people, and they ran off and brought up 2 people, and we had like a line at our car to buy eighths, and Mass G was one of them. I think he bought 1 or 2 and came back and bought some more. But him and Joe exchanged numbers at the show there, and then that's how they stayed in contact. So no cell phones back then, so it was more just on a piece of paper, and I'll call you when I get back home.
So did you were you aware of the kind of the exchange that took place after that when you guys got back and then Joe sent him the stuff in the mail, or you weren't fully aware of that at the time?
I think he sent him some Pbud first, and then sent him the dog bud, and I'm sure we were all like, oh, don't send it to him, I'm very glad he did, but, because that was it. We never saw it again, the dog bud. I've never seen it since, so it's probably a little like, oh, don't send it to him, but I think he sent him 2 ounces, and I had never seen a seed in any of the stuff that I smoked or anything. If I did, I didn't save it for sure. But, some of those buds were seeded. So, and Greg found in one of the ounces, I guess, I think, so Joe sent him 2 ounces. In one of the ounces, he found the 13 seeds.
So when he found those seeds, did he mention to you that he found them straight away, or was it more of just on the back burner thing?
You know what? No cell phones back then, so we kind of just lost touch with Mass G for years. I didn't keep in touch with them at all, and Joe probably did a little bit, but then, just fell out of touch with them. So, yeah, he can, Mass G, if you can get him on, he can definitely take the story from there, finding the seeds and all that stuff. We didn't really get back in touch with him until, 05, something like that, 2005, from just on the internet and seeing the sour diesel bud and from Massachusetts. And so Joe kind of put 2 and 2 together and was online for a couple years trying to corroborate this story of meeting Mass G and sending him that, and it being the dog bud. And then I was back east and got a bag of the sour diesel in like 04 or something, and called Joe Brand in California. Was like, this stuff smells just like the dog bud. And he was telling me about this story online, and finally, I guess JJ from Top Dog got Mass G and Joe together, and from then on they reconnected, and G sent him Joe, 4 of the remaining seeds that he had left.
Yeah.
So that's how they got back.
Yeah, okay. So, I got 2 little questions. So, that was the whole reunion thing that people talk about?
Exactly.
Yeah, and then the second part is, does that mean that, essentially you and Joe were just doing your own thing for about 10 years and the Chemdogs were in existence, so to speak, but you weren't
we didn't know about them. No, wow. We weren't smoking them or anything. So it was nice to, reconnect with Mass G and those guys and get those things, get those genetics for sure.
So when you did kind of put the story together / at whatever point you did believe it all, were you just like kind of surprised by, how many killer cuts had come from those 13 seeds? Like, was it all a bit overwhelming at first?
It's crazy how that one strain has changed the face of the weed world. For sure. we knew it back then. I'd never seen anything better than the dog until, we hooked back up with Mass G and got the Chem 91 and the D and then, Joe popped the 4 and, but yeah, it just, never seen anything like it before in our lives.
Yeah, okay. And so when you were first exposed to all the Chem dogs, what was your initial favourite?
I liked the 91 the best at first. Maybe the better question is, what order were you exposed to them? In order, I was exposed 90. So we hooked back up with Mass G, and I was in Connecticut, and I would meet him up at the the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Mass. Such a nice Mass G's just such a nice guy that, he'd drive, I don't know how long it was for him, but we'd meet there and he'd have this package for me, of just all the chems. And so I got exposed to the 91 D, let's see, and then, the chem crosses that he did, the bubble chem, and then I got exposed to the chem sister. But I liked the 91 at first the best. I thought after years it kind of got the taste kind of faded, but I've smoked some recently in the last few years from Duke, and it's he brings the flavor out for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because when I first tried it, I was surprised by how weak or absent the flavor was, but at the same time I was also surprised by how it was more present than I thought it would be at the same time. I know that sounds very paradoxical, but
yeah, it's the strength's still there. I mean, it's still just as strong as, but the D, that is, the smell is still there, the taste is still there. It just reeks. I mean, I know a lot of people love that just rotten smelling, funky, yuck smelling. My wife calls it yuck bud. It just smells just nasty. But a lot of people, I love it. A lot of other people love it too.
And so do you find that the D is, I don't know, I refer to it as like more functional than the 91, or do you think it's just still too crippling? It's
crippling. It's close to the 91. I think the 91 is probably the strongest of all of them. It's got no ceiling. I mean, you just get higher and higher and higher. D's pretty close, though.
Yeah, okay. And so I think Skunk mentioned that your now favorite is the D. Is that the truth? Yeah.
I that's taken over in the years, just the smell and the taste, and but the 91's a close second.
And so I guess my question is, why do you think that the 81, the D, why do you think that the D has been able to maintain those characteristics while the 91's faded off?
It's not as old. He popped Chem D in 2000, I believe. So it's 9 years, younger. It's probably the biggest reason, I would think.
Okay. And so if we go back to the story / our little timeline, so if we just jump back to when G sent Joe those further beans, obviously you were in the loop at that point. Were you really excited for what was going to come out of those beans?
Yeah, it was great. Joe Brand was in California. I think I moved out there and moved in with them shortly after he got those. And so the Chem 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 was, the best. Joe thought it's definitely the biggest producer of all the chems. The D is, probably close second. And so Joe kind of picked that one out as the best one, and really was generous with it and gave it to, a lot of people. Gave the 1, 2, and 3 to a few people. That I think there's a couple people that have the 3, and maybe 1 or 2 people that have the Chem 1 and 2. They were more, from what I remember, more OG like, not as a big producer, smaller buds, but the 4 was the one that called the Reunion Pheno. Joe named it that, and it's everywhere, and I love it. A lot of the people in the Chem family don't like it. It's kind of funny. I like it. It's good. It's the different smell than the rest for sure, which I think turns a lot of people off. But I think it's really strong for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I think it's because
it won the Adam Dunn Cup this year, so
okay.
It's saying something. So it's saying something.
For me, it was the taste. Like it was like the deer, but just not as good in taste wise.
It's different. It's definitely a different taste than the others for sure. But I think the strength is right there.
Yeah, for sure. I think with all of the chem dogs, that the strength is always there.
Yeah, it really is.
So I've heard some rumors from some people that the Pheno 1 that you just mentioned, that may have been the plant which went on to be that infamous Joe Brand 91. Would you be able to shed any light on that, or you got any opinions on that?
On the Joe Brand, the Joe B91? Yeah, I'm not really sure where that one came from, and I mean, I kind of have an idea, but I kind of really don't want to get into that. And
no worries.
It's kind of confusing, a confusing issue that I really can't really explain.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, maybe
it's good though. It's really good. I know there's people here in Denver that have it. And,
I mean, there are people who still breed with it because they think it's that good. You know, obviously they name it correctly, but yeah, I mean, one of the things I find so interesting about it is there seems to have been so many fake 91s, and I don't just mean like outright fake as in some random person has it, but as in like maybe someone close to the Chem fam or even in the Chem fam has a cut at one point and they think it's the right one, and then it turns out it's not. And it just seems so like there's so many of the 91 out of all the cuts, you know, it was the one which there would seem to be like the most replicas floating around.
Yeah, I would have to say it's the hardest one to get, the original, you know, the real, besides the 1 and 2, but of the ones that are out there, I think the 91 is definitely the toughest one to get, if, you know, and I think a lot of people have. I've ruined a lot of people's day when they send me pictures, and I got to just tell them that it's definitely not it, or they'll smoke me out on it, and I have to tell them it's not it. But yeah, it's definitely, I would have to say, the hardest one to get, and that's, you know, thank God that, you know, Skunk VA has protected that thing over these years for sure, because it's a special one.
Just to kind of put this point to bed, because I don't know how, but I get a lot of messages, people telling me the same thing, that they've got the real 91. I don't know why they're messaging me, but I say the same as you, like, it's probably not it. So my question is, has anyone, you know, like, and I don't mean to be rude to the people, but like just a random person not associated with you really in any way, has anyone ever like sent you a photo and you were like, hey, that's the real deal? Or is it always like, sorry, bro?
It's pretty much always, because it's, you know, it's mostly people I don't know, so I know who kind of has that cut out there, but most of the time it's no. I mean, I'll see it on the internet, you know, and different media web. I'll see it and I'll be like, yeah, that's it. But most of the people that send me pictures, it's not it. Or smoke with me, it's not it.
Yeah. And so, what were your thoughts on the initial Chemdog hybrids? You mentioned the Bubble Chem. I think another one G made was the Dog Waltz. How did you feel about those?
That's JJ's Dog Waltz. Yeah, fabulous. All the Chem crosses are great. Skunk VA or IC Collective or Skunk VA has that Chem Scout, which is, you know, one of the best crosses one of the best Chem crosses I've ever smoked. Chem D by I-95 is a really, really good Chem cross. But yeah, they're all good. They really are, if you have the real Chem.
And so when you saw how good these were as breeding stock, essentially, did the thought ever cross your mind to do a bit of breeding yourself?
No, I've never really been interested in breeding. I let that to my buddies. But I've always just been straight clone and kept mothers alive, and it's kind of what I've done, preservation, and never really got interested in breeding. I was a golf course superintendent for years, and so I always had a career and working, 80 hours a week, and so I never really had the time. Growing was always just a really part-time. Well, growing marijuana was always a very part-time thing for me. Always did it, but just part-time. Growing golf courses was my full-time gig.
Yeah. Okay, cool. How did you transition into the job you have now, which is Incredible Edibles? Sorry.
When my son was born, he's 4 now. We didn't really want to put him in daycare at that young of age, so my wife makes a lot of money, so I decided to stay home and take care of Bobby for first few years of his life, and so this past year he was old enough to we wanted to get him into daycare and nursery school and stuff, so time for me to get back to work. I worked for Elite Cannabis for a little bit, great company up in Longmont, and they do CBD. So I was working in their greenhouse and managing their garden supply store, and then wanted something a little more closer to home, and kind of put my name out there, and Derek contacted me, and it was really the company that I wanted to work for, because they just have such a good reputation. They just put out such a good product. They're everywhere in the state, and I just wanted to work for a good company, and things worked out, and very happy.
And so if we were to kind of talk a bit more about the edibles, do you find that the Chemdog strains work specifically well for edibles, or not really about potency? There's a lot of other factors involved in what strains make for good edibles? We're working on getting the Chem 4 first and start growing that and doing. I think it'll work better with the live resin and the dabbing and the oil. I think it'll make for fantastic. I've smoked some Chem 4 oil before, and it's absolutely amazing. So I think that's what we're going to do with the Chem 4. Yeah.
So I think it works better for oil.
And so, I mean, this may be out of your kind of realm of scope, but do you find or ever get any feedback of the strains that you're growing that they're specifically good for edibles?
Yeah, that's something I wouldn't know. I'm just locked in that warehouse and growing the plants. But I need to get to the other parts of the company, but just been concentrating on the garden. So that would be someone else in Incredibles you'd have to ask on the what's good for candy bars and that. Yep.
Okay. So when speaking to Skunk, there was a funny moment he described where he got back on the forums, and he was kind of unaware of how the community perceived him. In this sense, it was as a very well respected figure. Do you ever feel that way about yourself? Like, do you ever have to pinch yourself and say, like, hey, like, I'm a bit of a figure in the cannabis scene, or do you just not really view it that way?
I mean, I know I am, but I don't really view it that way. I was just kind of just living my life, and to me, it doesn't seem that exciting. But we had good times, Dead Tour, and met a lot of people and smoked a lot of weed and saved a lot of strains, and so we're just kind of living our life. That's it. But it's just amazing at what I just get blown away on the weed that Dog Bud has created. It amazes me that Mass G found those seeds and what became of them.
Yeah, so I mean, this is an interesting point I always think about is I think he was 17 at the time of the concert, and maybe he was 18 when he popped the seeds, but he is a youngin'. But the thing which always stands out in my mind was that he was very young when he popped those seeds, and regardless of if it was him or friends close to him, like, you know, those clones have managed to live on. Have you ever been, like, surprised or, you know, maybe more so impressed with how someone that young was able to kind of hang on to things loosely for all that time? Because I just think
it's amazing the insight he had that like I said, we could have had seeds, you know, and just thrown them away. He was one of those guys that went around and was looking for seeds, and at a young age, which is, you know, pretty impressive. And to do what he did with those seeds is very impressive in my mind.
Yeah. And so have you ever really spoken to him about how many people he actually gave it out to? Because, I mean, I've heard from a lot of people, and you even mentioned it earlier yourself, that G is just a really nice guy, and, you know, he does a lot for a lot of people. And I've always heard that he was never a hoarder per se. But at the same time, I always hear that, you know, like, no one has the real Chemdog. So it seems almost like paradoxical. Like, the guy who's got the real one seems to give it out, but no one has it at the same time.
I think they held him pretty tight in their circle. I mean, I'm not totally sure. You'd have to ask him on that one, but just because it's just not, you know, it's just not out there. After 25 years, you think it would be out there a lot more, but
yeah,
it's just not.
One of the conclusions I thought might have been the case was that, like, the people he was giving it to, they realized kind of the magnitude of the situation, and they decided not to give it out, because that could kind of explain it.
That could be it too. You know, you get something, you're like, oh my God, this is special. I want to keep it, you know, for myself. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, will take these and, you know, try to make money off them. And I don't really give them to anyone. So, just out of respect for those guys, and just, I don't want people to go take it and go make a ton of money off it. So
yeah,
I really don't give them out. I get asked a lot, but I just can't. I spend all my time at the post office mailing cuts to people. So
how do you feel about people who are making money off it, and more specifically, especially when you're pretty much 100% certain it's not even real?
That's the part I don't like, when you're just using the name. I mean, anyone can throw a name on something and trick people into buying their product. The guys that put out a good product and have taken the Chemdog strains, and like JJ, for instance, and made really good quality genetics with them. And, you know, I think it's awesome. I think it's great. The people that are being deceitful and calling this Chem 91 or calling this a Chem whatever and Chem whatever, and not having real Chem genetics, and that kind of rubs me wrong.
Yeah. So, I mean, on that same note, do you think that, just generally speaking, we will be able to put the Chemdog into seed form, or do you think it's just one of those 1 in a millions, and, you know, even if you could find the parents and do it, most of the seeds may not come out as strong or, you know, as similar?
Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to get that you're never going to get, you know, exactly what, you know, the clone is. I just don't think that's possible. I mean, you can get something close, but I think Skunk VA is working on something. That's Lucky Dog Seeds. That's what I'd be waiting for, his work. But if you want something close, you know, like JJ's, you know, the Star Dogs are really strong, and there's a lot of crosses out there that are really strong, but just you're not going to get, you know, the Chem 91 or the Chem D, or, the Chem 4. So
yeah. With that in mind, do you want to kind of see G get into doing some seeds of his own? Because we've heard whispers of maybe him doing something like that.
Yeah, I would love it now that, Massachusetts is legal. He told me he wanted to do something. So I think that would be, he deserves it the most. He's really the one that, if it wasn't for him, no one would be smoking. No one would be smoking the chems. So, yeah, anything he succeeds, that makes me happy.
Yeah, I think I speak for everyone when we say that.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned earlier that Joe was online. Were you ever really going online, or not until the story kind of got pieced together and you realised that there were people online who knew about you?
I think I was online before that. I think I started on the Overgrow and then the IC Mag, and I just picked Pbud as my handle. And then on IC Mag, this guy with the name High and Lonesome from Virginia, I believe. He kind of laid out the whole Chemdog 101 story on there. Really, really good with pictures and the whole story. Pretty accurate. He did research and talked to everyone, and that's kind of how the whole, and that was 15 years ago or something. So it's kind of how the whole Pbud and Joe brand and internet thing kind of blew up.
Yeah, I was going to say that's actually an amazing thread for anyone who hasn't looked at it. You go.
Yeah, it's great. Chemdog. Yeah, you can search Chemdog 101 and IC Mag, and it's
that's the name.
Got
of it?
Pictures and Chemdog 101.
Yeah, it's got all.
It kind of lays out the whole story. It's got the pictures, just killer.
Joe actually comments on it just under in one of the first comments. He's just under a guest profile, he didn't even have an account at that point.
Yeah.
And it was he's just hey, I'm that guy from the story, and no one believed him at first, and then he basically posts proof, and it's whoa.
Yeah, and Joe did a lot of. He was on the internet for a few years trying to sell the story, which was true, and finally, he must have said it so many times on the internet, jumping into forums and saying this is where it came from, and just got shut down for years, and then finally got reconnected with Mass G, and vindication.
Yeah, so after you did reconnect with Mass G through Joe B or whatever it may be, did you stay in contact with him, or was it still kind of a sporadic relationship?
No, I've stayed in contact with him since, 06. I've been, we saw him at the Dead shows last year in Chicago, and, talk a bunch and, text and stuff like that. So, yeah, we keep in touch for sure, and I buy a pipe from it, every 6 months. So.
Yeah, I need to get a little one. So basically, when G went down due to that whole res business, were you just peripheral to that, or were you kind of I
was pretty peripheral to that. There was, and I guess they got the last couple seeds too. The Feds got the last, I think, 2 seeds, so which was too bad. But yeah, I was kind of not really around him then.
And so, did you have any experience with res? Because it's it's almost a taboo thing to talk about res. But at the same time, what I find most interesting about it is, for all the negative things he's done, there's almost just as many people who want to talk about how good his Chemdog crosses were.
Yeah, people loved his Chemdog crosses. Just I only knew him just from the internet. He just had a big attitude, and wasn't afraid to get into it with people, and but yeah, he made some good crosses, but just not bad
decisions.
Just a bad. Just don't like to talk about the guy.
Yeah, no, that's no worries. When G was in jail, I mean, this might just be totally unrelated, but like, I mean, how did that affect ChemFamily? And more so, like, what is ChemFamily just this loose term to you, or is it actually something more than that? You know, like.
I think it's it's kind of loose term, but it's there's people that know the story and that are involved in it, and friends of G's, friends of my JJ, those guys, but Joe's, but yeah, it's kind of different groups of people, I guess, together that are associated with it.
And so, have you guys ever thought about, like, maybe pushing is not the right word, but like creating a brand similar to the way Cookie Fam have done it? And in my opinion, they've almost detached themselves from being 100% associated with cannabis, and it's more just a brand now. Have you guys ever thought about that with the Chem Fam, or not really?
I think about it all the time. I would love to. It's just we're kind of all in different areas of the country and doing different things, and I've always had a career and just the time, but would love to someday. Would love to. I think Mass G has the copywriter got the name Chemdog or ChemFamily or something. So, who knows?
Yeah, that was funny. Duke told us the story about how you ended up getting that.
yeah, that was pretty interesting.
So how do you feel about Chemdog being put into feminized form, regardless of which cutting it is? Because the reason why I ask that is because it's one of those strains where you really never find a real deal Chem 91 feminized or a real deal Chem D feminized. Do you think that's something which the Chem Fam has thought about and thought, like, we don't want that to happen? Or it's just you guys thought they wouldn't, like, the seeds themselves wouldn't turn out very good? Or what's your opinion on that?
I would love to see it happen. But I would like to see, Skunk VA or Mass G or, one of those guys do it, not anyone else. So,
yeah. Well, I think that's what is a really good reason to be getting skunk stuff, because as far as I'm concerned, like, I don't know if I'd really trust many people except for, like, you and Tommy to have the legitimate 91.
Yeah, no, I would jump on the skunk VA seeds. My friend got some for me at the Emerald Cup, which you were out at, right?
Yeah, I was hanging out.
Yeah, cool. So he's got those in Durango for me, so next time I see him, I'm going to grab them.
Man,
but,
I'm after those Durangos.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's I'm excited. I'm excited for those. And I'm not a seed guy at all, so...
Yeah.
But I'm excited for those.
So this is a question I've been asking everyone in the Chem Fam, and I think I might not actually get an answer until I can ask G himself. But I remember reading this post online, and it said that, like, I think it was from, like, G's point of view, like he was writing it, and he said that he always found that, like, it just said Chemdog, so I assume maybe it means the 91. He said that always came out best if you grew it organically, but then in the later part of flower it used like a synthetic PK booster, and it really brought out the chem flavor. Do you know if there's any truth to that? Have you ever heard anyone say anything like that, or not? You couldn't really comment on it?
Yeah, I couldn't really comment on that.
Well,
I just know I'm not an organic. I mean, I'm like 80% organic. So, and I take, I guess taking it, a lot of people take it to 70 days, and Duke likes to take it, and I think Skunk VA too, a lot, shorter than that, like 60 days. So they say that really brings out the flavor. Let it go too long, gets more of a narcotic high, and the taste kind of fades. So I got some now going in my basement that I'm going to take at 60 days this time. I've always taken it at like 70, so I'm going to give that a shot and see what happens.
Well, I mean, with that in mind, what was the strongest batch of 91 you've ever had, and who grew it?
I would have to, I mean, just the first time I really smoked it, was from G, so I'm going to say from him. just memory is just like, wow, just so strong, and just brought me back to smoking that dog bud and Crested Butte and on Dead Tour in 1991. So I'd have to say Mass G's the best 91 I've smoked, with Tommy a close second.
Yeah. Yep. Have you ever tried skunks? Because Tommy actually says that he thinks.
Yeah, I have. I've tried his, and his is phenomenal too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I've had more of Mass G's and Tommy's. So.
Yep. And so, just going back to when you were first smoking the 91, for example, was it just like? I try to describe to people what smoking the 91 is like, and all I can say is like it's just a different beast, like it's really just uncomparable to a lot of strains in many regards. Did you feel that way at first? Like, was there anything that could compare to it at all, or was it just so foreign at the time?
Just because I hadn't smoked, we smoked the Dog Bud 91 that summer, that was it, and then, I smoked the 91 and not until like 05. So, it was absolutely just amazing, the narcotic high it has, and the that expandness in your lungs where you try to hold it in, and it's just growing and expanding in your lungs, and you gotta blow it out, and then just instantly high after it. It's just strong. It's just strong weed.
Yeah, the first time I had it, I think I almost kind of greened out, so I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And you don't get immune to it. There's no ceiling. It's just, it's great medicine. If you have stomach problems or, anything like that, it's great for that.
So, the dog bud, that's often referenced as, the parent, or maybe just loosely as like the closest thing to the Chemdog, at least back in the day. But you also mentioned the Skelly hash plant, which is kind of a new cut that's come on the scene. Where do you think the Chemdog originates from? There's a lot of debate.
The dog bud, from people that have over the years that have asked the guys that brought it into Crested Butte where it came from, is like some valley in Oregon, where it came from. I don't know if it was being grown there, indoors there or not, but that's where I heard it came from. The Camas Valley in Oregon, I think is what it was called. But we still don't know for sure where it came from. The Skelly hash plant is that was from 1987, I believe. Friends of friends went over to Amsterdam and bought some seeds just labeled hash plant in a coffee shop in Amsterdam, and brought them back to Leadville, Colorado, and I think there were 6 seeds, and this one was the keeper, and it went to Crested Butte, and a guy named Skelly, that was his nickname, was kind of the guy that grew it, was kind of the master of growing it, and that's where it came. Skelly hash plant, it was called, and then kind of got renamed the Puck, because my friend Fatty would go over to my friend Rob's house and would always go, "Do you have any of the Puck? Do you have any of the Puck?" And finally we're like, "What the heck are you talking about?" And Rob had kept his hash plant in this fly fishing container that holds flies. It's like a plastic, and it was black from the resin, and it looked like a hockey puck. So Fatty he just kind of named it the Puck, and so he must have spread that around. I've lost contact with him, but he must have spread that around Colorado pretty good. And so when I got back, I moved up here to Denver and with a friend, and he's like, I go, "Yeah, I got this strain, got this hash plant strain. It's really, really old." He's like, "Oh, you mean the Puck?" And
I just put two and two together. I was like, Fatty, he's just one of the funniest guys I ever met, and he spread that word around Colorado, the Puck, so kind of changed the name of it. But it's just an old, strong, another really just strong strain.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one that's in a league of its own.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Have you ever seen anything that maybe, the third in that trifecta, or do you think at the moment the 91 and the Puck are in a league of their own?
They're pretty much in a league of their own, and they always, we smoked we were smoking Pbud, and then the hash plant, Skelly hash plant Puck came around, and that just was just insane. And then we've really never compared anything to the hash plant except the dog bud. So those two really are just the two strongest, most incredible strains that I've ever seen.
Yeah, without a doubt. So how do you deal with people trying to give you, quote, the real history of the Chemdog? Is it at the point now where you've had so many people try to tell you, about your life that you just don't even care anymore, or you just frustrate you?
We just got into it with a guy on Instagram the other day about he thought his uncle had the Chemdog before Mass G, and it was always spelled DAWG, and so yeah, it's a monthly thing at least. But I've heard so many stories and so many people's claims, and it's just frustrating because we lived it, and I know it's true, and it was our life, and Mass G's life, and there's Mass G, and there's the guys that should get credit for it, and Joe Brand, and those guys. So when people try to take credit for it, it's pretty weak, but I'm used to it now.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's probably a question a lot of people are asking is that, or thinking in their mind, is that Joe Brand's been seemingly absent from the scene for a while. Do you think he'll ever pop his head back up, or maybe he's not interested so much?
He's never really been a, internet and out there kind of guy. I hope someday he does, but I tried to call him and see if he wanted to do this interview, but I didn't get in touch with him. But hopefully someday, he will. I love the guy, and I hope for the best for him for sure.
Yeah. And so maybe a little left of the last question is, you've been around long enough now that you've seen strains come and go, and you've probably seen far more, quote, fad strains than just Blue Dream and Girl Scout cookies. Yeah. What do you think will stand the test of time, and what do you think is hot right now that's going to pass?
I'm really starting to get into all the OGs like the TK and the SFV, and I think those things will always be around. The headband and all those, those good. Like, I think TK and SFV are just two of the best OGs out there, and I think they'll stand the test of time. And whatever people can, that Chem Scout is amazing. The JJ stuff is amazing. So there's a lot of people getting more and more Chem crosses out there, and I think if you have a good Chem cross, it'll stand the test of time for sure.
And so, I was going to say, how does that Star Killer you've been raving about line up to those?
It's good. It's good. I'm not a big fan of the Scott's OG or the Rug brand. I mean, they're good, but this Star Killer is a step above. It's right up there with some of the better OGs for sure. And I think it's won multiple awards too. So this is my first time growing it, so I'm excited to see. I got about 30 more days on that, so we'll see.
So have you got a little seed library of your own? I mean, you probably do, but the question is, what's the next thing you're excited to pop? Because I'm always interested to know, like, what are you personally interested to get going soon?
people give me seeds all the time, so I do have a pretty good selection. What I do is, just because I don't have really the space and the time, is I give them to good friends and that are into, popping seeds, and then they'll find good stuff, and then I can get clones of that or whatever. But these Chem seeds I got, which is Chemd by 95. My buddy just popped some of them, and so yeah, we'll see. He actually harvested some of that, and it turned out great. So, but yeah, mostly I give seeds to a couple good buddies, and they pop them, and we see what we get.
Yeah. And so, in terms of your personal garden, are you like kind of like just a few strains and they're your staples and you just run them, or are you always experimenting, or are you like, me and Duke call it the the Lonely Island weed, where you just grow the one strain? I'm growing now just for personal use, where before I grow for income. So when I was growing for income, it was more one strain and, the money strain, the big producer. Now I grow a nice variety. So I got, SFE, TK, Star Killer, Chemd by 95, Chem 91, Chemd. So I got, all those going right now. So it's, it's nice to have different flavors for sure. Yeah. And have you ever had someone tell you that like a Chemdog cut was specifically good for a certain condition? Because I remember when I asked Tommy this, he said that the Chem 91 is great for people who want to gain weight because it gives you the munchies. But, but yeah, have you ever heard anyone say, this is good for Crohn's or something like that?
Crohn's, like Chem 4, I've got a couple of people that have Crohn's and love the Chem 4. Works great for them. I guess stronger strains, I don't know, may work for that disease. But yeah, and then I know the Chem 91 is good for any stomach issue for sure. It got me through my stomach flu last year during 420. So yeah, they're great medicinal strains for sure.
Yeah. And do you ever see Chemdog being explored more by the general public as a medicinal strain, or you think it's just not? I guess the way I think about it is, it seems like it's like a Band-Aid for a bullet in some ways. Like it's a very broad acting strain, but I don't know if it seemed specific in many ways, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm not really sure on specifics. I would love to see it used in medicine, for sure. It's just so strong. I don't know how, the side effects, or, I'm just not sure on, the medicinal part of the chems. But I know for Crohn's, Chem 4, and stomach issues, any chem.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think it would be interesting to see like a 91 or a D cross to a really strong CBD strain.
Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
So this is just a bit of a pot question here, but I think it's a good one. The 91 show itself, right? Despite everything that happened, it's gone down as a legendary show. Do you remember the show itself? Like, was it actually a good show? Because I thought, wouldn't it be so ironic if, like, arguably the most important dead show in cannabis history was actually a mediocre one in terms of music?
Well, for me, the dead kind of started going downhill 91, after Brent died. He died in 90. I wasn't a big Vince fan. Bruce Hornsby played with him for a while, but he had stopped. Show was good. I just remember a Jack Straw Bertha opener, which is like my favorite combination opener, but don't really remember the show too well. The Dead were kind of, 91 was a good year. 92, 93, 94, 95 were all kind of, the scene was getting bad, and
Jerry was just ill, and the Dead were good when they were healthy.
Yeah.
Straight up. When they were healthy, they were good. When Jerry was all fucked up, it was sloppy, and the shows were still good, but they weren't great. When 1990 was probably the last great year. Spring Tour 90 was probably the last great year. So
yeah, okay, wow.
But it was a good show. It was a good, cool venue. Deercreek is great. It's out in the middle of nowhere, like farmland and cornfields and camping, and fun times.
Yeah, so I mean, the Grateful Dead, they kind of passed on the torch metaphorically to Fish when they kind of finished up. But yeah. I've never heard of there being, that same impact on the cannabis scene as what the Dead had. I've never heard of there being like a car park scene at a Fish show, for example. Do you think that was a Grateful Dead exclusive thing? Like, do you think we'll ever get another, I don't know how to say it, like cannabis revolution the way we did with the Grateful Dead, or not necessarily?
I think it's people are getting it other places now. Just I think back then it was, like Skunk VA said, I don't know if she said this or someone said this, that Dead Tour was kind of like the first Facebook. So it was a way of connecting with people, and you knew they were going to be at that next venue, and so it was kind of I don't know if Fish does that. I don't really go. I've never been to a Fish show before, but yeah, I'm not really sure what the scene is like there, so I probably couldn't comment on that. But I know the Dead was the first Facebook, really, first social media.
And do you think that besides the Chemdog, that the quote car park scene of the Grateful Dead's contributed a lot to cannabis in terms of like recognizable strains? Like, had you ever heard of like, someone got like a TK cut at a Dead show, or like it seems like Chemdog is the big one that gets talked about in regards to the Grateful Dead?
Yeah, Chemdog's definitely the big one. I think it was more of selling flowers at the show, selling buds, and I'm sure cuts and stuff like that were traded, but the Chemdog one is the big one that most people associate with that.
So, I mean, how do you feel about the OG in relation to the Chemdog? Because, I mean, I realised just as I asked that question, there was a big major flaw in that. I mean, in my mind, I feel like the Chemdog is either the daughter or the sister or like some close relative to the Chemdog. So, I mean, you're probably not going to get an OG cut at a Grateful Dead show back in the day. But how do you feel all of that relates together? Are you of the same school of thought that it's probably some close relative? Or
I think they're related for sure. I think OG is just an S1 from a bag of 91. I mean, I can't prove it, but that's my thoughts. I think now that I'm growing OGs, they remind me of the 91. Not as big of buds, but they definitely remind me of it. So that's what I think, but the OG question is kind of a tough one to crack for sure.
Yeah. So if you were in G's position back in that time when, he was fresh 17 or 18, do you think you would have been able to keep the cuts alive as well as he did?
Depending on back at that young, probably not. No, just because I wouldn't have had the spot to do it. I was living just at my parents' house, and I wouldn't have been able to do that sort of thing. But thank God he did.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm just so amazed, like I I haven't met anyone who's truthfully said that, like, yes, I could have been in that position and also kept those cuts alive for all those years. 'Cause it's just so mind-blowing.
It's awesome, and just the work and that he did to keep those alive, and the crosses and all that. Yeah, it's awesome.
Have you ever asked him why he waited such long periods of time in between popping the successive seeds? Like, I've always wondered, why did he wait 4 years between popping the first and the next batch? Like, surely...
Yeah, I'm not sure why he did that. I think it was smart. I think he knew he had something special and didn't want to blow it all, maybe.
Yeah.
And do it over time. Just nice because he sent those 4 seeds to Joe, which was pretty cool. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of people...
glad he did that.
Yeah, a lot of people probably really kind of... I don't know how to phrase it, you know, like they're probably thinking I wouldn't have done that if they were in his position, you know, given that he knew what the seeds were at that point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was huge of him to do, and just such a nice thing, because after Joe got back in touch with him, he could have just been like, "Oh yeah, nice to talk to you again."
Yeah, see that.
You know, you can have some cuts, but you know, not for the seeds. So yeah, I think that was a great thing he did.
Yeah. So I mean, not necessarily in relation to giving the seeds to Joe, because obviously that was a very nice thing to do. But if you were in G's position, would you have ever done it differently? Like, would you have popped them all at the start, or just sat on them for longer, or, you know, what would you have done?
A tough question. I would have probably popped them all, and just, you know, gotten what we got, and then saved those. You know, kept all the keepers and saved them. So,
yep. So this is an interesting thing I've been told, which you probably have been told as well, is that someone's told me before, they said, I think that the Chemdog seeds were a result, they're all S1s, basically. And I said, yeah, but there was that male, you know, and that kind of ruins that theory.
Yeah.
And then they were like, yeah, but no one ever saw that male. It's almost like that male was, like, conveniently inserted into the story so that people wouldn't think they were S1s. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, I see what you're saying, you know, like the fact the male was there does show that they probably weren't S1s. But at the same time, I don't see why G would lie about them, you know, like what does he have to gain from that, really?
Yeah, he's nothing to gain. Yeah, I mean, and he wasn't putting himself in, he killed it, so he wasn't really putting himself in a good light. But, yeah, I don't, that,
yeah,
he's telling the truth.
yeah, that. So I guess what the question really was that, given that there was males there, what do you speculate the father was? You know, I don't believe they're S1s. I guess you've kind of said the same.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the father is. Tommy would probably know that better than me, being a breeder and knowing that sort of thing. But yeah, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is just because a lot of people have this, you know, thought that the father is what passes on the potency more so. And so, yeah, I'm always interested to know what the father of things is.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe the puck could be related to the dog bud some way.
Yeah.
I've kind of always thought that they're very similar.
So, I mean, for you, given that you have been trying all of this, you know, high quality weed from back in the early roots, so to speak, do you think that the modern day hybrids are standing up to those old favourites, or, you know, do you still find yourself reminiscing about the past?
I think there's a few that can stand up to the chems, but that most of them just don't. They just don't.
And so, do you think that modern hybrids have mostly improved on flavour and not so much potency per se?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are out there for the flavour, where I've always been for the potency. I don't really care too much what it tastes like. It's got, but good weed tastes good. I mean, it just does. I like that expanding in your lungs and coughing and all that stuff. I like the strong stuff. That's why I smoke chems and OGs. That's about it.
Yeah. You don't ever dabble in any glassworks, do you?
No, just buy them.
Yeah, it's just the reason I ask is it's like it seems like there's so many people in the Chem fam who dabble in it, whether it be I'm not sure his real name is it Weasel? I think he's also a glass blower.
Yeah, he blows glass. He's got some. JJ has a couple good pieces from him.
Oh, is he the one who did that fish one for JJ?
Yeah.
Oh, that's such an awesome piece.
Not the fish one. No, it's a guy here in Colorado, but like old school, just old school pipes. They're nice work for sure. But yeah, G does great. He does great work. I love his style, the old school. I just love it.
Yeah, I need to get one of those like little mini chillum type things. Tommy had one, and I was using that, and I just like fell in love with it.
Yeah, that's the mini hammers are really cool. And then his bubblers. It's all good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the other thing I'm always telling, because people like in Australia are just getting into glass really heavily now, and I'm always telling people like, because they say I mean I'm not a glass expert or anything, but they always ask me who should I get my glass from, and it's like, well, there's only one name I'm going to tell you. Like,
Chemdog Glass. Yeah, he makes. I love his colors and the millies he puts in them. It's nice.
Yeah, and I remember Tommy was even saying like some of those millies are like quite old and rare even, so like you truly are getting your money's worth. Oh
yeah, in the time he puts into them and
all handmade.
Yeah, they're great. I've got a dead 50 piece that he made.
Oh wow!
For the dead shows last year, and it's got like 10 dead millies in it, and it's my favorite piece. That's the one. If I break, I'd be crying.
Yeah, it's funny. I got a few dead ones in mine. It's like I always have to tell people what they are.
Yeah.
Oh well. So I think a good way to get back into this would be, like Chemdog is just the epitome of indica. You really can't get more indica than that. How do you balance the sativa side out? Because it's interesting, when I was talking to Mr. Soul, the way he described Chemdog was like it was that perfect counterpoint to the really super sativas he enjoys smoking. It can kind of bring you back to earth when you've blasted off too hard. How do you view sativas in relation to Chemdog, or is it just like Chemdog fills your need and you don't venture to that side of the river, so to speak?
I don't really venture to sativas. I think sativas are really good, like daytime, get you up and going, and good for like at work and stuff. But I've just always liked the knock you dead high. So I just want to smoke the pot that gets you the highest. That's my personality. So sativas never really did it for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just love the potent, really strong stuff.
And so, how do you think the scene would have progressed if there was never any Chemdog? It seems like a bit of a weird question, but I always like to think about this.
I don't know. It would be a sad world out there, I think. I don't know. Like I'd have another favorite weed out there, I guess. Which, I don't know. Everything I like came from Chem. So
yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? Because it's an interesting kind of thought exercise to do with yourself, where you think of like all these big name strains, and if they've got Chem in it or is suspected, you kind of cross them off the list. You're not left with much, are you?
No, you're not. Like, Gorilla Glue's out, and Sour Diesel's out, and all those really good strains wouldn't be here.
You just said the special word, Gorilla Glue. What do you think about it?
Yeah. I like it. I mean, I've grown it one time. I liked it. I kind of got sick of it, but it was strong. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the Gorilla Glue.
Yeah, well, something about the Gorilla Glue which really reminds me of the Chem is, I mean, a lot of people love Gorilla Glue, but no one really shows that same love to the ChemSys. And I think that a lot of the high, or the enjoyment of the high from the Gorilla Glue probably comes from the Chem. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The taste is the chocolate. It's kind of chocolatey in smell to me, but yeah, the high is definitely the sister, for sure. I mean, that's where it gets its strength.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing about the Gorilla Glue, which I think it definitely has parallels with the Chemdog, is that it seems now you're starting to get these fake Gorilla Glues going around, much like the fake Chemdogs. And so you get this situation, I think it was Tommy who said it, where it's like, everyone's had the Chemdog, but no one's had the Chemdog.
Right, yeah, exactly.
How do you feel about that, per se? Like, do you feel like that's a pretty accurate reflection? Because, yeah, like some people write it off.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, claim that they have it and smoked it or whatever, but I think the percentage of that is pretty low. I know that's the case on the 91. The 4 is out there and more available. Joe is really generous and giving that out to a lot of people in 06, and it's kind of made its way around.
Yep. And so, I mean, if we look at both JJ's and Rez's work, we see that they both chose to work with the Chem D, and we know that you like the Chem D more, but in many ways, I find it an interesting choice because just the raw potency of the 91 seems like it would be just an obvious one to work with. Do you agree with this trade-off they've done, so to speak, where, the presumption is they've thought, well, it's not quite as strong, but it's got better flavour or maybe better breeding properties. Do you agree with that choice they made, or would you have done it differently?
No, I agree with it. I think the D is so close to as potent as the 91. It's close. It's just got that. I think more people that have smoked the real 91 and the D like the D better overall. I think.
Yeah. And
it's very close to being as strong as the 91. So I think that's probably the smell and it's a better yielder than the 91, so could be another reason.
Well, I mean, do you agree with, I think it was not Skunk himself, but his former friend in the story he told, where he was saying, he feels like there's something about the Chemdog where it's like it's tied to the stars, where, it's this real fickle plant that's hard to master, so to speak. Do you think that's true, or maybe it's just we didn't understand plants the way we do now?
No, I think it's true. I think you got to have experience growing the chems. They got stuff they like and stuff they don't like. But Skunk VA has been growing that strain he's probably the number one expert on the 91 for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would whatever he says, I would believe it.
Yeah, that seems to be the case with everyone.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick the genetics which you think would best complement the 91, I guess to put it in a realistic sense, if you had to pick a male, which genetics do you think would complement the 91 the best? Because I think I asked Duke and he said that, he agreed that the Afghani landrace that both JJ and Rez picked was a good complement to the D. How do you feel about the 91?
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with what those guys said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, not trying to talk negatively about it, but what are some of the downsides about the Chemdogs which don't frequently get mentioned? I mean, the flavour was brought up a few times by a few people, including us. What are some things which people don't often consider, which you regard?
The ChemD can, throw out nanners and can variegate, and the Chem 91's, not the biggest producer, but those things really don't. The D is probably the biggest problem with that one, is throwing out those bananas, but they're not really. There's nothing in them, and they don't really. It's not like a lot of them unless it gets stressed, but those are probably like the biggest problems with it.
Yeah, see, it's interesting you bring that up, because a lot of the best strains throughout history have been created from the 91, throwing pollen on other things. But as you just mentioned, that the nanos on the D, they're infertile, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, do you find that the 91 is easy to hermy, so to speak? Because that's something I'm always thinking about. Given all these strains originate from it, I would have thought it was easy to herm. How do you find it?
No, I think they are all, easy to herm for sure.
Okay, interesting. And so, I mean, if it's not too much effort, give us a quick rundown of what your grow style is.
I do soil or cocoa. I just switched over to cocoa. I'm running Botanicare. I got a friend that works for Botanicare, and he's hooked me up with their whole line, their cocoa, and this run, and everything's looking good. I hand water, and just out of a watering can. I'm very nothing special at all. Just in my basement, and 3 lights, and enough for me and my wife and some friends. So it's good, and it's all legal, and which is great. So very happy with my basement, my little basement grow.
That's my new motto in life.
Because at work I'm taking care of 1,000 plants, and so I come home and take care of 10, and it's pretty easy. So
yeah, okay. Well, I mean, on that note, what's some tips for people who are looking to grow large numbers? Like, you must have to do things you must be looking for shortcuts all the time, given you look after so many plants.
Yeah, and we're doing soil right now, so we're hand watering everything, which takes quite a bit of time, but we're up close and personal with the plants, and it's when you get into the big things like that, you just have to be more just on top of things, preventative, and start when the plant's small, and just make sure it's really, really healthy to fight off any bugs or diseases or mildew or anything like that, and just really start from the beginning and make sure the plant's healthy all the way through. It's hard in the warehouse, but staying on top of it. But it's just a lot of hours and hard work, and a good team for sure.
Yeah. So, do you see yourself ever trying to turn Chemdog into like a full-on thing for yourself? Like, I just remember briefly chatting to Skunk, and he just mentioned that, like, he would love to be able to open like the Chemdog mecca, so to speak. Is that something you would envision wanting to do, or are you?
I would love to be a part of it, for sure, and help in any way I can. Right now I'm just kind of focusing on, my job and working at Incredibles and stuff like that. But I would love to be involved and help any of those guys out with whatever I could do.
As far as I know, you were, or people seem to tell me that you were the first person to kind of get the Skelly back into, the familiar crew's hands. What was that process of tracking it down like?
Well, my good friend Rob lives in Crested Butte. He's the one that won the Adam Dunn Cup, came in second place with the hash plant 2 years ago, and then won it this year with the Chem 4. He's been holding on to it since 87. He's lived in the same place in Crested Butte, so he's stable. But he has kept it, for all these years. Him and a couple other people in Crested Butte have been keeping it alive since 1987. So, all the credit goes to Rob and those guys down in Crested Butte.
Yeah. And have you ever made an attempt to try to track down the growers of the original dog bud, or do you think it'd just be too hard to do?
It'd be hard. Like the guy that I think they're all probably a lot older and not on the internet, and to find them would be hard. The guy that brought it into Crested Butte still lives in Crested Butte, and he's the one that told my friend that it came from the Camas Valley in Oregon. Not sure if he's in touch. I don't think he's in touch with the people that he got it from. So it's been 25 years of trying to find that strain again, and I haven't found it, or where it came from, or what. So maybe in the future.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe they're still growing it, the dog bud in Oregon. So who knows?
Just had its name changed.
Yeah, you never know.
So, how do you feel about how the public has received the Chemdog? I mean, I think I saw an interview with G in it where he said that he feels over the past few years the public has really warmed to it, where in the past people used to really write it off, but I think just maybe due to exposure, more people have had the real thing and are really impressed by it. How do you feel? I
think if you smoked the real thing, I think more people have smoked the real thing, and once you smoke the real thing, you won't forget it. I've had so many people tell me in the last couple of years that it's their favorite strain. It's the best one that they've ever smoked and never will smoke.
Yeah. And so, at certain parts throughout the history, because obviously a lot of people, basically everyone excluding you and the people directly involved, they're getting a lot of their information from online. So there are periods where, for example, I think it was around that High Times article that they did with G, where certain cuts were just thought not to be around. Like I think G thought he had lost the 91 and it was just gone. Were you ever in that boat where there were times when you thought, oh, well, there goes the ChemD forever, and then it turns out you get it back from a friend of a friend or something? Or was it always pretty well controlled and you never really thought things were gone forever?
Since we got them, it's pretty controlled. It's never been lost. I think that happened, earlier, back in the 90s and early 2000s. But since my friends have had it, there's pretty much, if you lose it, I know someone else, reliable has it. So, we got the ChemD back. I got my ChemD back a couple years ago, and this guy's had it since we gave it to him in, 2006 when we first got it, and then got it back from him a few years ago. So, and he's kept it, and he still has it, and will have it for forever. I think people don't want to lose it, so they put in a lot of effort in trying to preserve it.
Yeah. And Tommy mentioned that you can revitalize clones by vegging them out in the sun for a season and letting them get really big, and then taking some nice clones off them and bringing them back inside. Have you ever seen that done with any of the Chemdogs, and if so, did they come out any better than beforehand?
Never seen that done with the Chemdogs. It's always kind of been an indoor venture the last since I've had them, access to them. So it's always been just keeping them alive indoors.
Yeah. And so, if you could only pick, say, 2 of all the Chem dogs, which would you want to keep?
291 in the D.
Is it an easy choice?
Yeah, that's easy. If you're giving me 2 choices, that's easy.
And so I get, what's 3 then? What comes in third?
For me, it would be 4. It'd be the 4. A lot of people wouldn't say that, but I like the 4. I like the high of it. I think it's very medicinal. Instant high. Taste isn't the best, but yeah, probably 4 would be third.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess the number 1 is the D?
Number 1 is D. 91, close second. If you're taking everything, like smell, taste, high, everything, D is number 1 in my book.
And that means, the only thing if you had to pick one strain you could only have, that would be it, or that's just the favorite?
That's my island strain. Yeah, that's my desert island strain, Chem D.
I might have thought you might have said, it's my favorite, but it veges too slow.
Yeah, it's a good producer, and the only thing is that banana issue, but I've got it pretty much under control.
Okay, so I mean, if you could,
and Tommy's got another D cut that I got some flowers from him the other day. I was up there, and so I'm gonna grow that one out and maybe replace Tommy's with. Tommy got this one from Jeep way back when. So
yeah,
and it's phenomenal. I don't know if you got to see any of that, but it's phenomenal, and it doesn't throw out bananas, and it's never variegated on them. So I may replace that.
I think that was the one I tried, and then I tried the real one later on. But I think I kind of like Tommy's one.
Yeah, Tommy's is good. It's the real thing. G was telling that he thinks it's the sister, but there's no way. It's Chem D. It is, and that was a long time ago, and he gave him that cut. So mistakes happen,
Yeah,
time
for sure. So if you could only change one thing outside of the banana issue, because I think that's probably the obvious choice, if you could change one thing about the D and the 91, there could be different things about the cuts, but what would you change about them?
Nothing.
Not even like bigger yield?
I mean, bigger yields. It's the 91. If you could get a bigger yield, that would be nice. But
Purist.
I've always thought bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. My parents live in Maine, and the big fat 6-7 pound lobsters don't taste nearly as good as the 2.5 pound lobsters. So and I'm more of the shoulders on the plants. I like the buds at the shoulders instead of the tops.
Yeah.
So the 91 not being that big, it really doesn't bother me. But if I had to pick, that would be it. The bigger yielder is always good.
Yeah. And so, what's the most annoying thing about trying to talk to people about the Chemdog? Because obviously the history is maybe the obvious one, but sometimes I find it's even just people get really lost up in all the names because they've got all the different cuts, and people just lose track of things really quickly.
My probably biggest one is, and I'm a spell guy. It's just the DAWG. It's Chemdog. It's dog. It's a combination of dog bud, which is what we got in Crested Butte. We started calling it chem weed. So I think when we saw Mass G in Indianapolis, we were calling it chem weed probably told him it was dog bud and chem weed, and he just combined the names chem and dog, and there you have it. So it's DOG. It's not DAWG. It's never been DAWG. JJ uses Star Dog just out of respect for G, and and that's that. But it's always been DOG.
Yeah. And so, I mean, do you think in a way, that by JJ using that naming nomenclature that he's almost, inadvertently made it a little harder to refer to things correctly?
It's made it a little more confusing, but I think the biggest culprit was another company changed it before JJ changed actually Chemdog DOG to DAWG. I forget what company it was, but they kind of started it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dog, I mean, that version of Dog really didn't come out until like the later 90s. I know there was David Grisman has Dog Music, DAWG, but that's not what they're referring to. They're referring to like dog, like the urban way of saying dog.
Yeah. No chance he's just smoking Chemdog writing albums. I've read online that AJ has actually taken credit for, or at least he's said that at one point in time he was selling or giving Chemdog to people in New York, but calling it Diesel. But at the same time, so many people say that Diesel and Chemdog are not the same thing. How do you feel about that? Because some of the older guys say like, oh no, like there is no such thing as Diesel. It's actually just Chemdog.
No, I think they changed. They didn't. AJ didn't like. Those guys didn't like the name Chem associated with it, like chemical. They didn't like that name. They thought it brought it down, so they changed it to Diesel. I don't know if it was the smell or the word diesel meant something in New York. But yeah, it's the same thing. Chem 91 is the diesel. Because when I got a bag of the diesel, it was Chem 91. And then the sour diesel was more of that was an S1 of a Chem 91 or something, or I'm not really sure on that story. The whole sour diesel story, it's kind of been changed a bunch. Those guys don't have the whole story. I think I'm not really sure they know what exactly happened, but it's definitely from the 91. I mean, it is. I mean, the smell is similar. Sour diesel a little stronger, but yeah, I'm not really sure on that. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to spring an idea on you here. A lot of people give a lot of credit to Oregon and California for helping to kind of, establish the marijuana scene in America. But the more I kind of delve into the history of things, the more I think New York is like this unsung hero of the scene, because it's like, seems like when you trace back a lot of the best breeders, in my opinion, not just the Chemdog ones, like obviously all the Chemdog ones, but they trace their roots to New York. And it seems like that environment they had where people willing to pay for really expensive weed, like bred this environment where it was like productive to be a breeder and or just a really good grower, Have you ever thought about that at all, and do you agree?
I totally agree. I think just the combination of just people in New York are just go-getters, they just get things done. The market for the weed was, just, $6,000 a pound or $7,000 a pound. So, it was worth it for those guys to do what they did and to be able to make that money. And I think it's a combination of those things. But yeah, I think New York was a good, and outdoor too, up in the Ithaca, the Finger Lakes region, and Ithaca College, and a lot of Cornell, and a lot of outdoor weed up there for sure.
Did you ever get to try any of the stuff that Duke talks about coming out of Virginia, or that never really got to you?
Never really got to us. I smoked a lot of growing up outside New York City, we smoked a lot of pot from Laos and Afghani pot, and just really exotic weed that would come into New York. So I was pretty spoiled as a teenager.
Yeah. And were you smoking weed before the introductions of indicas to the scene, or they had always been around?
They're kind of like right at the beginning when I was smoking, smoking a lot of Mexican and Mexican weed and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of it started kind of when I started smoking it, those things started coming on the scene.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting because I've kind of found anecdotally the people who were around, especially growers before the advent of like commercial indica seeds like Afghanis, you'll never find one of them who says indicas are their favorites, because like they obviously grew up on sativas. So I thought it'd be interesting if you fell into that category, but the Chemdog had won you over.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
So with that in mind, throughout, your whole history of smoking weed, what's been the most enjoyable terpene or flavor profile for you? I know you said you don't really care too much for flavor, but for a lot of people, there's, these really kind of exotic terpene profiles from when they were younger because, things were more land racy. What is it for you?
I'm really into these, the SFE and the TK, the OGs, for taste. I really love that taste. I think the chems still get you a little higher, but I love these OG tastes. I believe the hype for sure.
And so, how do you think that the laws affected the scene as it progressed on? Because the immediate assumption one might make is like if the laws were more loose, maybe Chemdog would have flourished even more. Do you think that was necessarily the case? Because at the same time, it was still very, as you said, somewhat close guarded, in the right circle type thing.
Yeah, I think back then was definitely, there wasn't as much trading going on, and they were definitely held closer.
Well, the reason I ask that is just because I kind of think that it was the perfect breeding ground with the illegal environment in a sense, because it allowed there to be, if you look at the New York crew, for example, like those guys who were selling the Chemdog for crazy prices in the park, like if it was legal or more lax, like those prices wouldn't have been there, and then maybe there wouldn't have been as much incentive to keep the Chemdog around, because that's part of what I think has helped keep it around, was because it is obviously so valuable in so many regards. It just ensured its survival.
Exactly. I think just the laws and people, it being worth so much money, and people were, held it closer and protected it more. I would say.
Yeah. And so you mentioned earlier that you generally just grew from clones over the years. But with that in mind, were there ever any breeders who you kind of thought their work was pretty good? And bonus points if it's besides JJ?
Guys from, what is their company called? South Fork Seeds out in California are really good. They got all the real, chem genetics. If you have the real chem genetics and you're a good breeder, then your shit's going to be good. There's on Instagram, Mr. Bob Hempfield is, starting to breed now, and he's going to be coming out with lots of good crosses, chem and puck crosses. JJ, of course, and then Skunk VA. I would definitely check his stuff out when his comes out. You just got to be careful. You want to find someone that has the real deal, and not just claiming they have it and breeding with it and just putting out whatever.
Yeah, without a doubt, there's too much of that at the moment.
Yep.
And so, at what point did you really notice that the Chemdog was taking off in the mainstream? And even an extension of that is, like, you know, at what point were you kind of starting to get recognized as the figure from the story that you are?
Oh, probably an IC Mag. Kind of from then, people have just been reading about it for the last, 10 years or so, and it's just kind of taken on a life of its own. But probably after that IC Mag, it started to really. I really only got back into Facebook and Instagram and all this media stuff a few years ago. So probably when I went on the Adam Dunn show is probably when it really kind of really blew up.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Adam. I mean, you kind of partly answered this question, but have you met many other people who did, you know, have claimed they got to experience the dog bud and you know, they're describing it correctly to you and it works out the time frames about right, or not really?
Not the dog bud. I've had a few people over the years tell me that they have it and this, that. I've even had someone send it to me, send a sample, and it was not it. So I've never known anyone besides myself, Joe, and Mass G that have smoked the dog bud. I mean, I know there's people out there, but I have never heard of anyone getting it back then. It was just so incredible for 1991. This pot was just so incredible for that time. We just had never seen anything like it, and to this day, 25 years later, I've never talked to anyone that smoked the real dog bud before.
Was it outdoors?
Indoor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So this is just a bit of a personal question I was thinking to myself while trying the 91 is, how functional do you think someone can be, you know, the average person in the real world, if they are smoking these chem dogs all day? Have you met people who are still, you know, real go-getters, or do you just find it just still takes its toll on you?
I think it's your personality. I think if you're a go-getter, you can, you know, smoke it and no problem. I smoke it all day, and I'm motivated, and it helps me. So I wouldn't know what I'd do without it, for sure.
Yeah. And so I always like to ask people, like, what are their reasons for hanging on to cuts, you know, like specifically not giving them out. And when you're talking to breeders, it's somewhat obvious. But one of the interesting topics I had brought up was that not necessarily like you're looking to keep it out of the hands of the masses, but the reason I got told was that you know, people can not look after the plant well, and you know, they take poor clones of poor clones, and then eventually, you know, you've got, like, for example, let's say it's the Chemdog, you know, it's like it's just really degraded, and then it's giving everyone a poor representation of the Chemdog, even when it's done well, just due to the clone. Do you feel like that has somewhat happened to the Chemdog? Because when I heard that reasoning, the first thing that popped to my mind was like, that seems like that's kind of what has happened with the Chemdog in some ways. Like, I mean, I've just been told from so many people that, you know, the biggest reason why clones fade off, so to speak, is because sometimes, you know, you're not taking the healthiest cuttings.
Yep, and that's you got to take healthy cuttings. It starts from the beginning. You got to take them from a nice healthy mother, and it'll just, the plant will be happy for its. As long as you take care of it, it'll be happy for its life. So I think people. I don't think that's the reason people kept them close. I think people kept them close just because it was special, and you know, they wanted to. I don't think people thought, you know, that if I give it to this person, they're going to degrade the plant. I think people just found something special, and they wanted to hold on to it.
Yeah.
Or they got conditions, someone gave it to them and said, don't give it out. Stuff like that.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think we've only got some short answer questions left, so these are just, you know, more fire away. But
okay.
What's what's this is a two-parter, you know. What's your least favorite strain, you know, like the worst strain in your opinion? And then the second part is, you know, without necessarily giving away the breeder, what's the worst cross you've ever seen the Chem in, you know? Because obviously some strains just don't work when you cross them to others. It's just, you know, genetic.
Yeah.
What's the worst one you've seen? What does it not agree with?
I don't like fruity strains. I'm not a big fruity guy. So, you know, any of those purple grapey ones or tangerine-y ones or, you know, all those. I'm not into those. And the Chem cross, I'm not really sure. Most of the Chem crosses I've smoked, if it's the real Chem, I like it.
Maybe Chem cross to some fruity purple thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I've seen a couple people crossing them to some fruity stuff, and I haven't tried them, but maybe the Chem will make it strong at least.
Yeah. It's like the one silver lining.
Yeah.
So, what, you know, obviously you've been around the scene for a long time. What's been the worst thing to happen to it in your opinion?
The scene, just, oh God, just some of the people getting in the business and in it for the wrong reasons, and just seeing people 20 years ago or 15 years ago that would just look at me and thought I was just the biggest piece of shit, you know, low grade person in the world, and now they're all pro marijuana, and it's just kind of weird. People that would look at me differently 15 years ago and look at me differently now. So that's kind of what bothers me the most, I would think, about this business.
Have you ever had someone, you know, like try to get back in contact and kind of like get an in with you once they realized who you are when maybe they had previously written you off?
Yeah, most people from high school, you know, mostly. But they're getting back in touch with me because they know they have a sick, you know, relative or something, and they're looking for answers, stuff like that. And
yeah,
happy to help them out. But
yeah.
no, they're not looking for strains and stuff like that. I get people asking me for the chems all the time, and I just have to just say no all the time. So
yeah,
that's kind of hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so, what do you think is like a big mistake people make when they're growing the Chemdog? Because for me, it's, you know, a lot of people say it's so finicky. So, you know, what's something about it that it likes or something it doesn't like?
Like Chem 91 doesn't like a lot of light. I usually put them kind of on the outskirts of the light. They seem to do a lot better.
Wow.
But if you're, you know, follow your you know, fertile program and tender love and care, they like a lot of CalMag. You know, D likes CalMag up until, you know, week 7. So just a couple things like that, but it's not a very hard plant to grow.
Yeah. So I mean, I've thought about the scene that the Grateful Dead created, and it seems like, you know, it was like that perfect storm for progressing the scene. Do you think that trying to create something similar to that in a modern sense would work out, or do you think just the climate is too different and it's just, yeah, it wouldn't work in the same way?
Yeah, I think it's just different. I think people are just more out in the open and trading things. Just, you know, you can buy cuts on Craigslist now. So it's a different time we live in. So yeah, I don't think it would. I think it was just that time that we were in. And
well, do you think that given like so much of the masses are now newly jumping into cannabis cultivation, at least in America, do you think that could be harmful in any way? Because it seems like there's a lot of growers who don't necessarily know how to deal with a lot of problems that could have flow-on effects. Like,
the cloning one.
Yeah, I think the cloning one's one, and
pest resistance.
Pests for sure. You get more people, and but yeah, I definitely problems for sure. The more people growing.
And how do you feel about what's widely regarded as somewhat over the top rules in you might not be fully involved in it, but in the Oregon, I believe it is, have got some pretty insane testing requirements. How do you feel about those?
Testing is I'm kind of up in the air on testing until they have like a standardized test, I guess, like a machine this is the way it's done. I think they're kind of different machines, and so I really don't the testing, I don't really believe in the testing too much. And if you have 27% THC crystals on your whatever flow bud, and you have in the chem tests at 20% or 18%, I think the chem crystals, the makeup of those 18% are better than the 27% on the other bud. I think the crystals, the makeup of those crystals are stronger and better. So I don't, so a 17 could get you higher than a 27. So
yeah. So I mean, what do you think? It's obviously probably going to be a guess, but if you did have to guess, what do you think that the average sample of well-grown Chem 91 does sit at? Because like if that is the strongest weed, then we shouldn't, and it's not testing high, then who cares about numbers?
Yeah, I think the 91 and the 4 and those they test like mid-20s, I think. So it's never like 30% or anything like that. But yet they're the strongest strains that I've ever smoked. So I'm not a big believer in testing yet.
And so our final question, if you could go back to any time and get any seeds from anywhere, whether it be seeds you could buy from early in the day or just landrace seeds, and you're allowed to just obtain them, what would it be?
Man, I think I would have to go back to 1991 and take that ounce from G and take those 13 seeds from him. No, those are special seeds. But like a nice African landrace strain seeds from Africa would be nice.
Have you been one of
go back to Amsterdam in the 70s or early 80s and see what they had? Get some of that old Sensi seed stock or something like that. But I think I'd go after those 13 seeds that G found.
I was trying to bait you into the Skelly seeds, but you gave a better answer. Oh, well. Yeah, have you tried JJ's Nigerian?
Yeah, that's one of the better sativas I like. Kind of reminds me of, all that weed I used to get in high school from different countries and stuff. But it's good. The Nigerian's great. It's great.
Yeah, I just thought maybe that was where the African comment came from.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think that brings us to the end. Thanks so much for coming on, Pbud. Is there any questions or shout-outs you wanted to do?
Just shout out to Incredibles and everyone down there. Great company to work for. Go out and get some bars and pretty much every dispensary in Colorado, I think Incredibles is in. And shout out to Matt, to G, for doing what he did with those seeds, and thousands of people. Thank you. And my good buddy Joe Brand. Shout out to him if he's going to be listening. I miss you, buddy. And that's about it.
Awesome.
Shout out to my wife. Shout out to my wife, of course. She's my better half.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
So there you have it. A big thanks to Pbud Mike, ChemFamily, Mass G, OGS, 420 Australia, and the Billy Shop. See you. A cannabis show for budding enthusiasts.